All right, let's start Parshas Terumah. It's a fascinating parsha. Fascinating. I mean, they're all fascinating. They're all fascinating. But this one is got a what do you call it? It comes across looking very dry because it's all a description of the utensils in the Beis Hamikdash. And it starts on page 444. So let's take a look at Parshas Terumah because it's a what do you call it? It's the descriptions of the utensils, which is what most of the parsha focus on, is really very, very enchanting. So it says like this: Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yikhu li Terumah. Speak to the bnei Israel, and literally translated, it says, "They shall take for me a Terumah." Terumah is a donation. May ace kol ish asher yidvenu libo tikhu es Terumah. From any man who's so inclined, you should take the donations. Now, this is talking about when they're going to build the tabernacle, the Mishkan, and in order to get the raw materials, people are going to have to donate. The Jewish people had a lot of raw materials because they'd gotten it from the Egyptians, both in Egypt and at the sea. So he says, "Okay, I want you to make donations for me." Now, the first question here is: do you see anything strange about the pasuk beis? Anything in the structure of the pasuk which strikes you as strange?
Heart motivates him, maybe?
Okay, we'll see what that means. What is it? What's the heart got to do with it? We'll see in a second. What else?
Take from me.
Take for me. Right. Very good. In other words, this is talking. This is how my grandfather used to talk. You know, somebody from Europe used to talk like that. You know, take to me an orange. You know, because in Yiddish, a lot of it was translated from Yiddish. So he would walk into a room and he would say, "Make out the light," which is to turn off the light, you know, because in Yiddish it's macht. So they translated it directly like Americans do in Hebrew also. Sometimes you'll say to somebody, "Shalom echata," which means, how are you? But there is no, Israelis never say echata. It's an American, Israelis say ma shlomcha. Right? If they say anything at all, they say "Ma shlomcha." Ma shlomcha means "How are you?" Echata means they would look at you puzzled. I remember, you know, how many Americans have walked into a restaurant and asked for a kelev cham, which is a hot dog. You know, "Slicha, yesh lachem kelev cham." It's like, "Are you okay? You know, you're okay. You got a hot dog around here. You know, what's a Yeah, right, exactly. What's a kelev cham? You know, you got so in Hebrew it's called a nakniki, and Americans do this on a regular basis. The real joke. You walk around if you pay attention to look at the signs on some of the stores when they translate the signs into English. So in English, like frozen goods is called kfuim. Kfuim, kafui is frozen. Kfuim is frozen goods. It's like a meat store. It's like meat. It's basar v'kfuim. Meat and frozen goods, like frozen vegetables and stuff like that. So one guy had a store, and he translates it. We have fish and frozens. Because when they put up the sign, they're all over the place. They put up the sign, and some guy opened up a dictionary, and he saw frozen. So, you know, just added it. So now they paid 7,000 shekels to have an electronic sign put up there, and he's got it misspelled, fish and frozens. So it says over here, "V'yikhu li Terumah," they should take a Terumah for me. They should take to me a Terumah. I mean, we would say they should give me a Terumah. Why is it they should take to me a Terumah? And any of you who have learned the Gemara should have the answer to this. Any of you who learned the Gemara tradition should know the answer to this. When you give, remember we're discussing, is there a possibility of a woman giving a man the ring and being married to him? The man has to make the declaration of, "You are betrothed to me." He has to make the declaration. Can you have a scenario, a woman comes to a man and gives a man a ring? Now, who's supposed to give the ring in halacha? The man. How can you have a possibility where a woman gives a man a ring and she's betrothed? It says if he's a prominent individual. If it's her honor that he should receive the ring. If you go to the President of the United States to give a class, you know, they used to make these class trips. And you go to make a class trip and you give the President of the United States a gift. What if the president would say, "Sorry, thanks, I don't take from Middle Easterners 2 weeks before the elections. Forget it. You know, I'm not interested." Right? What would your reaction be? You'd be hurt. You'd be insulted. You give your mother a gift for Mother's Day, and she says, "No, I don't want the gift." You're upset because you want her to receive the gift. You take more out of the person receiving the gift. So when you go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to give something to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what are you taking? You're taking the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu receiving the gift from you. And therefore it says, V'yikhu li truma. They should take from me a truma. Because ultimately for you to be one of the privileged few who's been chosen to give it, that's already an honor. You're one of the privileged few. Sometimes in life you have the privilege of doing something that's difficult. You have the privilege of being accepted to medical school. You are now going to work harder than any human being that you've ever met, and all your friends are political scientists, or majoring in political science are going to have a great time in college while you're studying around the clock. But you're the one who's receiving because you are taking, and therefore to give to God and have God receive your gift and not His gift. Remember, the first act of giving to God in history was what? Cain and Hevel. Cain they brought offerings and God didn't accept it. Hevel brought offerings and God did accept it. Who was more upset? Cain was upset because he wasn't accepted. Hevel had the privilege of his offering being accepted. That's God taking. God is taking, but it means you're taking. You're receiving. Therefore, the Torah says, take for me a truma. Okay, now, Torah then says, Asher yidvenu libo. His heart has to be in it. In that same pasuk, Asher yidvenu libo. His heart has to be involved in giving the truma. Now, listen carefully, because it's very, very interesting. Imagine you donate money to Or Sameach. You go out there and you make a lot of money, then you decide to donate money to Or Sameach. Now, say you write out a check for a small donation of $100,000, okay? And you send it to Or Sameach. Where does that money go?
To your pocket?
That's what the next stage is when you earmark money for Kaplan. That's true. But right now we're talking about, let's say you just gave it to Or Sameach in general. What does the money go to? How do you know? Things that are needed in the yeshiva. Yeshiva has a lot of these. They got electric bills, they got food, they got teachers have to be paid, they have secretaries they have to pay, there are maintenance men, there's a million and one things. So the way yeshiva works is they have a general fund, and you write out checks for everything. Your money goes into the fund, and you write out checks for various things, and your money is included with all the other money. Where did your money go to? I don't know. Did you pay for the potatoes this week, or you paid half of my salary this week? You know, well, you don't know. Your money goes into a fund. Okay, that's when you're dealing with money. But what about when you're dealing with raw material? So look what the people donated. We'll come back to this in a second. Take a look. V'zos ha'truma, I'm on the third line. V'zos ha'truma asher tikhu beitam. This is the donation you should take from them. Zahav, gold. V'kesef, silver. Nechoshes is copper or copper. Utcheles is wool dyed blue. V'argaman, wool dyed purple. V'tolah shani, red. V'sheish v'izim. And then all sorts of fancy hides. V'oros elim eldamim, red ram skins. V'oros techoshim, which is some sort of animal that's not defined, just very colorful animal. V'atzei shitim and shitim wood, which is, how does he translate shitim? Tell me, is it acacia? Is that how I translate it? Acacia wood. Shemen lamor, oil for burning. Bisamim l'shemen amishcha, and various bisamim, perfumed, what's it called? Spices. V'liktoris asamim, and for the ketoris. And then avnei shoham, precious gems. V'avnei miluim la'ephod v'lachoshen. Okay, so you got raw materials. Then you got certain materials which are earmarked. So if you donate gems, the gems are going to go to the choshen. We're going to take specific gems for the chest plate that the Kohen wore, and the two gems on his shoulders, which we're going to learn about next week's Parashat Tetzaveh. But what about if you give gold? Now, there was a lot of gold that was used in the Mishkan. There was gold that was used on the fence for coating the fence. They melted it down and they painted the fence with gold. There was gold that was used to make a menorah. There was gold that was used for utensils. There was gold that was used to make the Aron Kodesh, where the Torah was, and put in the Holy of Holies. Now, if you donate an ounce of gold, what's gold at now? About $1,100, $1,200? Okay. You donate an ounce of gold to the base of Mikdash. What do you think your request would be as you donate that gold? It's raw material. It's not going into a general fund now. What would happen to your gold? If I was donating gold, they say to me, okay, sir, do you want this on the outside fence melted down and used for paint for the fence surrounding the courtyard? Or would you like this to go to make the kruvim that will stand on the holy ark? I'll take a wing, please. I'd like a piece of the wing over there, maybe the cover of the ark. I don't want my stuff used to make a spoon or to make gold paint over there. Now, what are we going to do with it? It's raw material. Where are you going to put it? I was like, okay, I'll be a menorah man. Right, but I don't want my stuff on the paint out there. I want it in the base. I'm giving you gold. I want it in the base. So what do? The answer is that it depends on the heart of the person who's donating it. The people who were involved in the building of the Mishkan, Bitzalel, who was the architect of the Mishkan, who never took an architectural course in his life. He never took an art course in life. He was raised in Egypt and he's been in the desert now and he's 13 years old. He never took a course in anything in his life, but he is imbued with what's called Ruach HaKodesh, with the divine spirit to know how to do it. Part of that Ruach HaKodesh is to be able to read the hearts of the people who are donating it. And when the gold is donated, he sees this gold has been donated with 97% full devotion. This is a 94%er. That's going out on the fence. This is an 87%er. That's a spoon. And this is a 99.6%er. That's going into your own Kodesh. Oh, we got a 100%er over here. That's one of the malachim. In other words, the heart in the donation of the person who gave it, that donation is an indication based on Ruach HaKodesh of where it is in the level of holiness in the Megillah. That's why the Torah says, Asher Yidvenu Libo. It all depends on the heart. Because we're not talking about a general kitty where you write out checks. If I told you, yeah, you gave a check to the yeshiva, your money paid for those tissues right outside the bathroom. Thanks for your donation. Where all those tissues that guys take too many and crumple them up and throw them in there, that's your money. Thanks for the tissue donation. And nobody, I ain't a tissue man. Right? I'm not a tissue man. I'm feeding the poor scholars in the base medrash. The guy who had one more bite and he wouldn't be able to learn. It was my schnitzel. Everybody wants a piece of the serious action. So it goes into a general kitty and, everybody has a piece, but not when there's raw materials. I was right. You know the story about the lawyer? Guy gets a call from the United Jewish Appeal or something, one of these things. He says, hey, Goldstein, our records show that you earn upwards of $850,000 a year. And we haven't received a donation from you. So he says, really? Do your records also show you that my mother is living alone? She's a widow on her own. Do your records also show that I have a disabled brother who's a Vietnam War vet? Do your records also show that I have a sister who's a widow with 4 children that have to be raised? And if they can't get a dime out of me, what makes you think you will? So, it's all about the heart, it's all about the heart. If the heart is there, I want to tell you something. This is unbelievable. You got to hear this. The other night I gave a talk for an organization. There's an organization that helps divorced women and their children. So they had a fundraiser in Rechavia with very wealthy people there. So I was speaking. They invited me to speak at the fundraiser. I wasn't raising funds. I was more talking about the mitzvah in general. I got up to speak. It was 10 o'clock on Motzei Shabbos. There's an elderly man sitting in the front row with his wife. And as I get up to speak, the guy looks at his wife, because there had been a couple other speeches. He looks at her and goes, hey, for crying out loud, it's 10 o'clock already. I want to go home. An old man. So, that was my welcome, And so I get up, and as I get up to speak, the guy says, how long is this going to be? So I said, how long do you want? He says, 5 minutes. I said, how about 10? He says, 8. We started going at it. So then I started speaking, and no matter what I said, the guy was, like that. And even his wife started poking him, saying, Harold, please. She says, and the guy was completely indiscreet about it. And the people who had organized it were very, very embarrassed. It was so bad that at a certain time I had spoken for about 5-10 minutes, and I turned to the lady organizer and said, how long do you want me to go for? Because this guy kept, it was unbelievable. This has never happened to me. I've had hecklers before. There are ways to deal with hecklers when they ask disrespectful questions. I've never had somebody who's disruptive like a 4th grader. And he wasn't even, if the guy, at a certain point I said, sir, if you'd like to leave, leave. You can leave. I have no problem. I have no problem. I won't be insulted if you leave. If you want to stay, stay. But, and he just sitting there like he wouldn't leave. He kept bothering me. And at a certain point, I hate when I actually lost it. He actually first I was joking and playing with him. Then I actually got the point. I said, sir, look, I was asked to speak here. This is an important subject. Please stop disrupting. If you want to leave, leave. If you want to stay, stay, but don't disrupt. And it was unbelievable how rude the guy was. The people were embarrassed. The people were embarrassed. They were embarrassed. And what I really should have done, I went home. I was very upset. I told my wife. My wife also said that's absolutely unacceptable. What I really should have done at a certain point, because not my job. My job is to speak. I should have turned to the people and just said, "Can somebody help me out over here? I can't continue like this. Let them take care of the problem." So what happened was afterwards, I called the next day to tell the lady who organized it that I felt bad that I had she said no. She was we apologized. I just want to tell you something. That man gave the biggest check of anyone in the room. He gave the biggest check. So sometimes in life, I don't know, next time what I got to do is I got to stage something like that. Plant a guy over there, get this guy to give money. So you never know. The heart is there. So sometimes the heart could be there. He just want to go home on a Motzei Shabbos. But why he didn't get up and leave? He could have left. We're telling him, please leave. He gave the biggest check of anybody there. That's what she said. All right. So, that's why the Torah demands the heart. Okay. Now, take a look at Pasuk. So now we have the raw materials. Take a look at the bottom line on the Pasuk on the bottom line on the page, Pasuk Tes. It's actually Pasuk Ches. Pasuk Tes begins the next page. Ve'asuli mikdash, they should make a temple for me, a Beis HaMikdash for me. Ve'shachanti besocham, and I will dwell among them. Okay, now, the first thing is like this. There's a medrash that says like this. Command, make a tabernacle. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, how could we possibly build the entire world is contained within you? Did you ever hear Hashem referred to? One of the names of Hashem is Makom, that for when somebody is comforting a mourner. So what do they say to a mourner? HaMakom Yenachem Eschem. May Hashem comfort you. We refer to him as the Makom, the place. Because the Gemara says, Hashem isn't in the world is in Hashem. Hashem is the place of the world. Okay? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you're the place, the world is within you, how can we build a tabernacle that's going to contain you? And God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, you do what you have to do. I'll take care of the rest. You do whatever the human endeavor is, and let me worry about it. And that lesson means that in life, whenever somebody is undertaking a challenge, do what you can. Do what you can. Results, let HaKadosh Baruch Hu worry about the results. You do as much as you can possibly do. Every Jewish community, the Rambam says there's never been a Jewish community that doesn't have a shul, doesn't have a mikveh, doesn't have a tzedakah fund. In my community, they're now building yet another shul. They just finished one shul, they're building another shul. And these are all guys who learn in Kollel. Where's the money come from? Money comes from donations. But it's going to happen. The guys take on the project, and the project happens. The shul that, I want to tell you something, you know how my shul got built? With the shul in my community was a young community. The people couldn't afford housing in Yerushalayim. So young married couples made a project. They went out, they made an agreement with one of the builders. This is going back 25, 30 years ago. They made an agreement with one of the builders. He had built a project. They said, we'll get a group of Kollel people here, give us a reduced price on the apartments, and we'll come in with a unit of people. Okay, so there was the first surge, and I was in the second group that came in. They didn't have a shul. We were davening like in many of the neighborhoods, we were davening in a bomb shelter. They turned a bomb shelter into a shul. Okay. The guy who was behind the project decided we need to get a shul built. So he goes, there was an eccentric Jew, an elderly eccentric Jew from England who never got married. He's a very wealthy man. He used to come from Scotland. He used to come to Israel once or twice a year, stay in a hotel, and he brought suitcases of cash. And the poor people would line up, and they would each come in one at a time, and he'd give them a donation based on what they said their needs were. And he was an eccentric. It was somewhat of an eccentric. This guy was waiting in line with all the poor people to present his project for the shul. But at a certain point, the guy, his attendant comes out. He says, "Okay, that's it for the night. Everybody go home." He's closed. He's going to sleep. So this guy from my neighborhood went around, and he closed the door. He went around the side door of the hotel. Just walked right up to the guy's room, knocked on the door. The guy could, come in. He sat down with him, told him we want to build a shul. He said, great, I want a shul named after my father. And he gave him a donation of $15,000. He pledged $15,000. That started, we have a shul. The shul is named after this man's father. Right? So if a guy would say to you, how can you go and get to how are we ever going to succeed? Just try. Kosh Baruch has all sorts of funny ways and means to bring people money. All sorts of funny ways that a Kodesh Baruch Hu has to bring. You just make your effort. That's what he says to Moshe Rabbeinu. You build. I'll take care of the rest. Have you ever heard of Ezer Mitzion? You heard of the Ezer Mitzion, the medical relief organization? There's a best. Ezer Mitzion is all over Israel. It's one of the biggest medical relief organizations in Israel. They have a camp for disabled kids, and they have medical supplies. And just a massive organization. One man started, a man named Rabbi Hananya Cholak. So one day the phone rings and Rabbi Cholak saw in the main Ezer Mitzion office. And he picks up, he happened to be there that day. He's usually out doing stuff in the field. He happened to be walking through the office. He picks up the phone. Phone rings. He picks up, hello. Hi, is this Rabbi Cholak? He says, is this the director of Ezer Mitzion? He says, yeah. He says, hi, my name is Mrs. So-and-so. I want to donate $2 million to your organization. He goes, oh, that's great. He says, and you know why I'm donating? Because I was told that there's no wasted money to your organization. There's no waste. There's no frills. There are no secretaries working in the office. It's all being done. He says, thank you very much. I just happened to be here today and answered the phone. Usually we do have a couple of full-time secretaries because it's a massive operation. I just happened to be passing through. I picked up the phone, but I really didn't. No. You answered the phone. There are no secretaries. I want to give it. He said, we really do have secretaries. I don't want to hear about it. She gave him $2 million to the org against his will. See, and these stories are ridiculous. The way people go. There's another guy comes to a Rosh Yeshiva. This is true story. These are true stories, documented. They're documented stories. Guy comes to a Rosh Yeshiva here in Israel, and he says to the Rosh Yeshiva, "I would like to give $4 million for your yeshiva." So yeshiva might have 2 sons learning in this yeshiva today. He said, "I want to give $4 million to your yeshiva." The yeshiva says, "Well, that's great. So I only have one condition. I want you to promise me I have a portion in the world to come." So the yeshiva says, "Look, I could promise you you're doing a big mitzvah. I could promise you you'll be rewarded. God rewards all mitzvahs. I can't promise you a portion of the world to come because I don't know what else you've been doing in this world. So I can't make that promise to you." He says, "Come on, for $4 million, I think you could promise me." He says, "For $4 million, I can't promise you because I don't know." He says, "Look, you don't promise me, you're not getting the money." He says, "What can I do? I can't promise you something I don't know." So the guy says, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, really, absolutely. I can't promise that. You get reward. It's a big bit, so I cannot promise you a portion of the world to come because I don't know." So the guy says, "Well, I just want to tell you something. You see, there's an elderly man who passed away, and he willed $4 million to your yeshiva. His heirs are challenging the will, and they said that the reason he's donated so much money to your yeshiva is because you promised him a portion in the world to come. I am an agent of the court, and I was sent here to test you. Had you promised me a portion in the world to come, you would not be getting the money. Since you did not promise, your yeshiva is going to get the $4 million. Right? So, just when you think, well, let's bend this way, let's twist that way. Bottom line, you do what you have to do. Be honest, do what the halacha says, do it. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu worry about the results. That's what he says to Moshe Rabbeinu over here. The Panovich Rav, you heard of the Panovich Yeshiva? The Panovich Yeshiva was built here by the Panovich Rav after the war. Panovich Rav lost a wife and 11 children in the war. Came to Israel. He was the Rav in Panovich in Europe. He came to Israel, and he decided to transplant. We got to build Torah in Israel. This is right around the founding of the state, a few years before the founding of the state. He went to Bnei Brak. There were, nowadays you see yeshiva students all over the place, right? There are about 70 or 80,000 yeshiva students in Israel today. In the time of the Panovich Rav, if there were 200, that was a lot. So he went and he bought that hill on Bnei Brak. The Panovich Yeshiva stands on a hill. And he built a massive entrance. He said he wants an entranceway where 500 students could go in and out on a regular basis, not with one doorway. So there's a massive entranceway for the Panovich Yeshiva. So they said to him, "You are out of your mind. There are 200 yeshiva students in the entire Israel today. You're out of your mind. This is never going to happen." One man even said to him, "You're dreaming." And Panovich Yeshiva says, "Well, I may be dreaming, but at least I'm not sleeping." Right? So he built Panovich. Not only that, there's a famous story that a man said to him, "I'll give you a large sum of money. I'll give you $100,000, whatever it was, a massive sum of money, on condition that the students in your institution don't wear yarmulkes." So the Panovich, the guy was anti-religious. He said, "I'll give you $100,000 for your institution, but they can't wear yarmulkes." So Panovich Rav said, "Okay." He took the money and opened the first girls' school in Bnei Brak. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. They said he was crazy. They told her of Dessler in England. You've heard of the Gateshead Yeshiva, the Gateshead community? The Gateshead Yeshiva. Do you know how that started? In 1940, the shochet in Gateshead was a man named Reb David Dryan. Reb David Dryan sent out 22 letters to various rabbis in England. He wants to start a kollel in Gateshead. 18 of them did not bother answering. 3 of them wrote back, "Well, it's a great idea, but in case you haven't heard, there's a world war going on. and people haven't got money to spend on kolos. Rav Dessler, who was living in England at the time, his family was in Lithuania. He was in England. So I said, great idea, let's do it. And he spent the next 6 years separated from his family. His wife and daughter were in Australia. His son was in Cleveland. They had run away from Europe. He was stuck in England by himself. And over the next 5-6 years, he built up the entire community. So how would you do it? You know, that's ridiculous. Are you out of your mind? The answer is, do it. Just do it. And let HaKadosh Baruch Hu worry about the results. Okay, that's idea number one. Idea number two is, Ve'asu li mikdash, make a mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. Do you say anything wrong with the structure of that pasuk? Anything wrong? Anything peculiar? Anything odd about the structure of that pasuk?
Which number is it?
On the bottom of 444, last line, pasuk ches. Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'socham. They shall make for me a mikdash, and I will dwell among them.
If God is everywhere, why is making the sanctuary?
We'll get to there in a second. Okay, that's a separate part. We'll get to that in a second. Something structural in the pasuk, not conceptual. Structural in the pasuk. Something should be bothering you.
A sanctuary for me as opposed to make me a sanctuary.
Okay. No, in Hebrew that's how you do. Vasu li mikdash.
So that I may dwell.
V'shachanti, and I will dwell. What should the last word of the pasuk be? If you make a mikdash, is mikdash singular or plural? Plural.
You.
V'shachanti, vasu li mikdash, you should make for me a mikdash. V'shachanti b'socha, and I will dwell in it, in that mikdash that they make. Now, it could also be understood at the plain level of V'shachanti b'socham, I will dwell among the Jewish people by being in this mikdash. Okay, that's certainly the plain meaning. So the commentaries say, yeah, it's true, but it's also an allusion to the fact that every single Jew has to make himself a mikdash. V'shachanti b'socham, I will dwell within every Jew. V'shachanti b'socham, you have to make yourself a mikdash. You have to make yourself a receptacle, a dwelling place for God. That's v'shachanti b'socham. Now, Mike is asking a question. I'll get to you one second, Mike. Let's take your first question first. There is a fundamental dispute here among the Rishonim, among the medieval commentaries. There's a fundamental dispute here, which is, was the Mishkan an ideal or was the Mishkan an afterthought? That's a fundamental difference among Machlokas Rishonim on what the purpose of the Mishkan was. In other words, had the Jewish people not sinned with the golden calf, which comes later, but chronologically came earlier, it's reported later, had the Jews not sinned by the golden calf, there's one school of thought that says, had they not sinned, there would never have been a command to make a mikdash. Because God's presence would be everywhere. You sinned, you're not on the level now to have God's presence everywhere, so we're going to have to put it in one intense area. That's one opinion. The other opinion is, no, this was part of the plan all along. And the idea of God's presence being concentrated in one place is because any time you have an important meeting with somebody, you always specify a place where you're going to meet. We will meet in this restaurant at this time to discuss this deal. We don't bump into each other on the bus and say, oh, by the way, I got a $5 billion deal going down. You have a place where you're going to meet because it's important. So that's a fundamental dispute, not non-resolved. There are two opinions over here. One opinion is that it's an afterthought, and therefore we are penalized. Otherwise, God's presence, whatever that means, would be absolutely everywhere in the same degree of intensity. The other opinion is, no, this is the place, it's the meeting place for the Jewish people. You're being punished because you've shown yourself unworthy as a result of the sin of the golden calf. Those are the two opinions among the commentaries. Okay, so tomorrow we'll start on the Aron Kodesh tomorrow. We have have to go through the utensils. We'll start on the Aron Kodesh and on the Shulchan and everything else tomorrow. Okay.